Hello YouTube. Let's today look at the most unknown object in the universe, as somebody called human brain. First, we will look at the 11 dimensions of the human brain, an amazing discovery by scientists, as far as I know. It is curious that the Russian neurophysiologist Natalia, who devoted her whole life to studying the brain, eventually came to the conclusion that she, like her colleagues, knows nothing about this organ. And indeed, researchers still continue to discover more and more new secrets of the brain. For example, Swiss experts have found that the human brain is able to perceive up to 11 dimensions. As the Russian author Kursanov noted in his book Infinity and Eternity of the Universe, it is considered that a person is a three-dimensional being. It has a length, width and height, and people live in the same three-dimensional space. In order to imagine a two-dimensional world, scientists must often suggest imagining a flat creature that has only length and width and is able to move and see only what is along the plane. If a person from the three-dimensional world takes an object from the two-dimensional one and transfers it to the third dimension, then it will seem to the two-dimensional ones that this object will dematerialize or disappear. However, academician Isai Davidov, in the publication Program Development of the Entire World, writes that even those three dimensions in which a person exists characterize exclusively physical space. The fourth dimension is time, which cannot be included in space in its usual sense. It requires a completely different kind of space, which is called space-time. Besides, time, at least for now, is impossible to see or feel. That is why some experts believe that people live in a 3.5-dimensional world. But that as it may, all four dimensions are combined into a single whole and are inextricably linked. Meanwhile, most scientists are sure that there are much more than four dimensions, or should I say many more. So why does a person not see them? According to Lisa Randall in her book Reaching the Heavens, a scientific view of the structure of the universe, with reference to physicist Oscar Klein, human perception is too limited, and therefore some dimensions that are very small are indistinguishable for people. As a vivid example, Randall cites a man walking on a tightrope who sees his path as one-dimensional, but a tiny ant on exactly the same rope is able to move in two dimensions. Presumably space is curved or twisted, which allows other dimensions to hide. The collection The Origin of the Universe, editor-in-chief Alison George, mentions M-theory, which develops string theory and suggests that people actually live in an 11-dimensional universe. Proponents of the theory are of the opinion that the four main dimensions are large and almost flat, as Stephen Hawking wrote, so a person is perfectly familiar with them. But the remaining 7 dimensions are so tightly twisted that they simply fall out of sight. However, if a person does not see time, this does not mean that it doesn't exist. Similarly, the situation is with additional dimensions. Unexpectedly, scientists found evidence of the existence of 11 dimensions in the human brain. In 2015, Swiss neuroscientists who joined together in a research group called Blue Brain managed to completely reconstruct the brain, or rather the neocortex, using a supercomputer. The model was created using algebraic topology, that is, a branch of mathematics that describes the properties of objects and spaces regardless of changes in their shape. The head of the scientific group, Henry Markham from the EPFL Institute, announcing the results of the work done, said that the team members observed a world they never expected to see. As you know, there are about 86 billion neurons in the human brain, which form a network in all possible directions, forming consciousness. So the Swiss discovered that the information processing process is similar to the construction of towers made of cubes. The brain, responding to stimuli, creates and then increasingly complicates towers. The mathematician Ran Levi, a member of the Blue Brain, described it this way: everything starts with one-dimensional sticks. Then the brain switches to boards, 2D, then proceeds to cube, 3D, gradually moving to the more complex geometry with 4D, 5D, etc. According to scientists, there are objects in the human brain whose dimensions correspond to the 7 dimensions, and some instances live in the 11-dimensional world. Let's now look at the Russian scientist Bekhteryova. Well, Natalia Petrovna Bekhteryova was born in 1924 in Leningrad. Her grandfather, Russian neurophysiologist Vladimir Bekhteryov, is the same doctor who was not afraid to diagnose Stalin with paranoia. Others, however, believe that this is only a legend. You can see my video on the subject. I think it's very informative. Well, I don't know if it's true that my grandfather made such a diagnosis to Stalin, Natalia Bekhteryova used to say, but it is known that as a result of a visit to Lenin, Bekhteryov said that the communist leader had syphilis of the brain. If the grandfather was removed, it was so that, God forbid, he would not mention the diagnosis among the doctors. So during the years of Stalin's terror, Natalia Bekhteryov's father, engineer and inventor Pyotr Bekhteryov, was executed by firing squad. Her mother was sent to serve time in a concentration camp in Mordovia, and Natalia, as the daughter of the political enemy of the state, was placed in an orphanage. Natalia Petrovna Bekhteryova was a great scientist of amazing destiny. She, an academician, professor, doctor of medical sciences, author of almost 400 scientific papers, made a breakthrough in the field of brain research. Bekhteryova revealed the secret of this veil, what mechanisms control emotions, memory, thinking, and what make a person human. And world-renowned scientist, she headed the Institute of the Human Brain of the Russian Academy of Sciences. And she had great prizes. She was awarded orders and medals and so forth. And what's interesting is that she was the neuroscientist and psychologist who developed neurophysiological approaches to psychology, such as measuring the impulse activity of the human neurons. She was a participant in the documentary films The Call of the Abyss and The Storm of Consciousness, which aroused wide public interest. Candidate of biological sciences, doctor of medicine, full professor. Now, in her life, she encountered amazing and scientifically unexplained things, or inexplicable. These are prophetic dreams. Natalia Bekhteryova said that she believed in the existence of the soul, life after death, and prophetic dreams. It was a very bold statement at the time when religion and mysticism were banned in the Soviet Union. So for this, the scientific community declared war on her, accusing her of pseudoscience. She was blamed for her interest in paranormal phenomena and mysticism. But her life experience said that all this is possible, and science should not ignore it. During her life, Natalia Bekhteryova, she had 4 prophetic dreams, which were completely repeated later in life. For more than a century, Bekhteryova studied the most unknown object in the universe, yes, the brain. She didn't like it when the brain was compared to a computer, and she was compared to a clairvoyant. But at the same time, she did not deny the unexplained phenomena associated with the human brain. and dedicated the chapter to the looking glass to them in her popular science book, The Magic of the Brain and Labyrinths of Life. She was an incredible woman. Now, let's look at one interesting view of consciousness. What is consciousness? How does it work? Why and how do we think? The questions are eternal. There is no answer to them. More precisely, there was no answer. But not long ago, a medic and a physicist, Stuart Hameroff, of the Center for Conscious Research at the University of Arizona, has put forward a revolutionary theory that is so convincing and beautiful that it seems to really solve the mystery of the millennia. A so-called quantum collapse occurs in the brain, an incredibly complex phenomenon, and as a result, a thought is born. But then the brain turns out to be a kind of analog of the universe, or a quantum computer created by nature, which is able to mentally communicate with any point of the universe and with any civilization, even on the outskirts of the galaxy. Science and philosophy have stormed the problem of conscience from two sides. Science was looking for a material carrier of thought, for example, a neuron. It turned out that when the brain dies, consciousness, cognizance, awareness, perception disappears. Philosophy separated thought from the brain and presented it either as a knowledge-filled ether or atmosphere. I'm referring to Vladimir Vernadsky and his so-called noosphere. Or as an aura around a person's head, but it couldn't prove anything. Experiments with psychics did not give a clear result. Sometimes mediums showed amazing effects, but often they could not do anything, and many also turned out to be magicians or illusionists. And all this time, in a strange way, quantum mechanics remained on the sidelines. Strange because it operates with consciousness from the very beginning. Let's take a closer look at this. Quantum mechanics appeared at the beginning of the 20th century. Unlike the theory of relativity, which was created by one man, Albert Einstein, this is collective creation. Despite its strangeness, it instantly and forever became the basis of physics, because it incredibly accurately explains what is happening around us. And what is the strangeness? What is it? Quantum mechanics says that normally matter and energy are in an indefinite state. So light is both a wave and a set of particles, photons. But once an observer, a person, intervenes, matter is determined. Light, for example, becomes either a wave or a particle depending on what is expected from it. This is the collapse of the wave function. Well, the term is unfortunate, but everyone is used to it. Radical researchers say that the world does not exist at all until we look at it. Others claim that the entire world is filled with consciousness and is an observer. Both the tree and the stone have consciousness. Despite the obvious strangeness, the collapse of the wave function is easy to see from experience, which is even shown in advanced physics classrooms in secondary schools. So there is no doubt. But what is it about perception, consciousness, that it changes the universe? Why is the observer so important? Physicist and mathematician Roger Penrose from Oxford, a member of the Royal Society of London, was the first to suspect that consciousness has a quantum nature. Hameroff has been working with Penrose for 30 years and wants to understand exactly how it works. The fact is that the quantum theory of consciousness is a bit unscientific and allows for telepathy, mind-reading communication with an ancient oak tree and ancestral spirits. That is everything that mystics indulge in. Of course, that's how the scientists look at it. And this is somehow not good because there is no sense with mystics, according to scientists, at least some of them. For example, Bechterova would have said differently. If you postulate such incredible things, you need to explain it scientifically. And that's what he got. Penrose realized that every particle of the universe is just a curvature in Einstein's space-time. When such a curvature or bubble bursts, a quantum collapse occurs and consciousness appears. But in his model, consciousness was born as if spontaneously and could not generate meaning and memory. The universe was clearly thinking, but like a schoolboy who is staring out of the window in class, now about one thing, then about another. Hameroff suggested that the neurons of the brain organize these bubbles of space-time so that their pops form something like music. That's what's formed. This music contains thought, memory, and information. The philosopher Pythagoras in the 6th century BC said almost the same thing. How did he know? Let's leave this question for now. Hameroff's hypothesis was received skeptically. Existing quantum computers operate at ultra-low temperatures in a sterile environment. Can quantum transition occur inside a warm and moist brain? Now Hameroff was able to resolve all doubts, and that's what he got. Light itself is consciousness. Previously, it was thought that a conscious observer forces matter to make a decision. Now it is clear that the opposite is true. The quantum transition, on the contrary, generate consciousness. Ancient traditions characterize consciousness as light. Religious figures were often depicted with glowing halos or auras, Hindu deities with glowing blue skin. In many cultures, those who have awakened to the truth are enlightened. Hameroff writes in his recent article, Hameroff presented a complete layout of how it works at the level of photons, atoms, molecules, and neurons, which chemical reactions and substances are involved in the creation of consciousness. The most important conclusion follows from his theory. Consciousness preceded life. Traditional science and philosophy suggest that consciousness arose at some point in evolution, perhaps quite recently, with the advent of the brain and nervous system. But Eastern spiritual traditions, panpsychism, and Roger Penrose's theory of objective reduction suggest that consciousness preceded life, according to Hameroff, and these traditions turned out to be right. Again, how did the ancients know? Hameroff describes in detail the early universe filled with the light of the Big Bang. The universe was then a megamind, but then the substance became cloudy and a period of unconsciousness came. When it ended, complex molecules began to appear. With their help, the universe began to think more clearly and accurately. Thus, the whole universe has consciousness, because consciousness directly follows from quantum mechanics and relativity theory. A person is more conscious of a stone only because the neurons of the brain are a more convenient medium for quantum transition than the crystal structure of a stone or wood fibers. But a person is definitely not the only and certainly not the first thinking being. Just by thinking something, we turn on, actually not we, it turns on itself, a quantum transition that connects us to any point in the universe and to any complex mind that exists anywhere. Amazing. The more we study brain, I'm sure the more fascinating things we will find out. Unless the brain studies us. We will see. I appreciate your attention to my work. and I will bring you more videos. And if you can support my research, you will find the links in the description to this video. Please like it, and please subscribe. Thank you.